Welcome, Steve. How are you?
I'm great, Rob. It's glad to be here with you.
Well, everybody, today is a special day. We have Steve Cholas in the building, in the Real
building.
Talk.
I refused to do it remotely. I had to come in here and see this action.
And I'm so excited. Actually, the first interaction I had with you was 7 months ago, I think, at the ERA conference, and you were a breakout session you had.
It was disruption.
Disruption.
And now look at
us. Look at this.
We're totally disrupting.
We're disrupting the whole industry right now and trying what we do. And I know that from what I've researched about you, I've gone and people I've talked to, you were always a little bit of a disruptor in the marketplace and media. And you've always been edgy, and you've brought you always bring a different perspective that people don't really look at all the time, and which is amazing.
I'm not sure how to take that positively or negatively, but I get where you're coming from.
No. I mean, as a positive thing is that I give you the compliment. Yes, I come out to that way, but it is a compliment because I think that really is what we need today. But even starting in your career from in the industry from the 80s, which we'll start from, is like really who is Steve Cholas? Where did you come from, and how did you even get into the electronics industry that we're currently working in today?
Well, I'm going to give you my best effort. Without mentioning names, because there's too many names out there of people that are probably going like, Cholas, don't bring up my name, whatever you do. So you have my word. I'm not going to bring up any of the media folks that I've learned from and were inspired by, or I offended, and the same on the industry side. But before I do that, we said you're prepping a little bit for this, and this is kind of like a combination or somewhere in between Joe Rogan, as I said to you, and Anthony Bourdain. So I applaud you for doing this. We need more of this, and I love the subject matters, and it's kind of no handcuffs, right? So
it's open, free hand. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Coming from you, for someone who is an expert in the media industry, I really appreciate the compliment. Thank you.
See, we're already making some of my cohorts out there nervous. Cholas as an expert. All right, so I think, what was your original question?
My question was who is Steve Cholas, and how,
how did I get here?
How did you get here? How did you get on the Real Talk?
How to get on Real Talk. So you want from the beginning, I was born. Yeah. Right? Okay. So, I found my way into the industry in 1983. Okay. Right? It began in 83. I really formally came into it in 84. I had a neighbor, won't mention his name, who I couldn't figure out what he did for a living. But I was living in Mission Viejo, right? And I was working for a structural mechanical roof structure company here in Orange County, right? And we were building all the commercial structures. And I couldn't figure out how this guy was having a good time all the time. And I asked him, so what do you do for a living? He says, I'm paid to have fun. I go, wow, well, I want that job, right? Yeah. And it ended up being that he had worked, he was working in high-tech media, selling space. I don't know what that means.
High-tech media selling space,
selling space. What does that mean, selling space, right? This is print days for all you that remember, right? So in any event, I got an interview with CMP Media back in the day. Took a couple days off from the job that I have. Kind of didn't tell them the truth where I was going, but I needed to go to New York for an interview. And I got interviewed by some of the executives at CMP Media. And a lot of you probably don't know CMP Media. I'll explain in a minute, but because I think that's part of this industry, part of the DNA to our industry. I think a lot of it started with the early media days, right? Especially with CMP. But in any event, I got the job, and I was off and running, carrying a bag, and
traveling salesman
in Orange County. It was the mecca of distribution back in 84, 85, those early 80s.
There's a lot of manufacturing here too. There's a lot of power companies.
AST.
AST was here. I think Power One was here.
Power One was up in the valley.
Okay.
In the valley, but you had a lot going on. This was kind of a hub. Some other areas, but in any event, I cut my teeth on space, and I was calling on Hamilton Avenue at the time, and I was told that you want my money, then you need to go learn our business, right? Yeah. And so I spent like a week on the road with a Hamilton Avenue salesperson and learned the business. So from there, things went on.
Oh, wow.
It was awesome.
So CMP, was it one of the first media space companies for the industry?
It wasn't the first. You had, media, prior to CMP, electronic news, electronics magazine, things like that. CMP was founded by a couple, Jerry and Lilo Leeds, right? Both, they exiled from Germany, concentration camps and such, and came to the U.S., very highly educated, engineering.
Okay.
And saw in 1971 that there was a communication gap between buyers and sellers.
Okay.
And they fashioned a newspaper after Women's Wear Daily. and thus became the launch of Electronic Buyer's News in their living room. And that became the first, I think, weekly publication that had the mainstream connected distributors and component manufacturers to buyers. You didn't have that. You didn't have that before.
Yeah, from all the print. Yeah, all the print.
And then the following year, they launched EE Times,
okay,
which became authoritative. And then after that, it just started smoking hot go, right? Mm-hmm. It was the first media company, you know, the brands, Computer Reseller News, CRN, Bar Business, Information Week, Computer System News, Network Computing. It was the first media company that went live on the web. I think it was in '94 through TechWeb. We launched TechWeb, and we became the first media company to become all of our brands fully on the net.
Oh, wow.
You know, so we kind of revolutionized. I mean, we took no hostages back in the day. It was good.
I mean, taking a step back, coming into it in the 80s, of course, everything was print. A lot of people don't even realize what print is these days, but how it worked and how difficult did you really get to know the technology? You know, you knew there were manufacturers at that point. There was those reps, and there was the manufacturer component, and there's manufacturers that end product. So, what did it take for you to understand and experience and get educated upon? Did you figure out the product, or you just figure out where I put this, who needs the product, and where do I place it? What happened there?
Yeah, that's great question. Yeah. You know, and you know, probably going to offend some media representatives out there, but you know, for me. That week I had to be on the road when Hamilton Abnett told me, you want my business, go learn my business, right? And I didn't know what a capacitor was, the difference between a capacitor and a catfish at the time, right? You know, thought I was a pretty smart guy until I realized I wasn't so smart, but the job intrigued me, right? So it became pretty quick that distribution was fascinating to me. Calling on purchasing, supply chain. Back then, it was pretty much purchasing, buyers, you know, and those kind of things. But engineering was involved in some of the higher technology. And so I was fascinated by it. Learning that semiconductors were coming into, you know, high intensity at the time, right? So I want to learn semiconductor, right? I want to learn what that's all about. And that way I can immerse myself in the business, right? And I think you have to do that if you want to get good at something, right? You got to immerse yourself. So I couldn't help my advertisers if I didn't know what they were up against. Okay. You know, and at those days in print, it was all about brand. You know, you didn't have the technical connection.
Yeah, it was branding
today. Yeah.
It was branding. So I mean,
it was an awesome learning curve.
Yeah, it is, because as it days you come as a salesperson, it doesn't matter. You're in sales. It's sometimes, you know, there's an easy. Some people are salespeople, don't even know what they're selling, but there's such high demand. They're like, okay, you hear it's for you. I want this, and they don't even know what the product does.
I think the transition has been very hard for a lot of people right now, certainly in media. I know we're going to talk about media. Yeah, we'll get to
but going into that, but it's interesting to understand, because no matter how you come from, and everybody starts from somewhere, and that's why your story is very fascinating. So you start from somewhere, how you got into media, from a friend, from a neighbor, coming in, and how you got in this industry that, for us, is the best hidden secret is electronics. And the foundation and landscape of what it was then and how it is to now, it's gotten light years.
So rapid. I mean, to be part of the original DNA, you know, and to see, you know, all electronic gear and wear back from the 80s all the way, you know, to now, right? You know, if you're in media, you know, you have a chance to really be at the beginning. Yeah. You see it ahead of time, right? You know, and understanding the system, the structure, and the development, the engineering that happens. If you pay attention. Yeah. If you pay attention.
So that's why it's very fascinating. So when you get big working in the early 80s, mid 80s, there was really no platforms, it was just publications, right? And there was probably a dozen of them, we would say?
Yeah, you probably had, you know, dominant brands through the 80s into the mid 90s until CMP. You know, I hate to keep going back to CMP, but CMP was a pivotal point in this industry, I think, because it matched up to ecosystem, right? You had a company that was launching, you know, at one time it had 52% share of all spend globally. You know, I mean, come on, that doesn't happen anymore. But, you know, it was built on 3 tiers, right? Builders, sellers, and users, okay? And you had the builders, they look engineers and purchasing folks. They had the sellers, you know, through the VAR channels and such, and then you had the enterprise, the companies that were using the equipment that was being built, right? So to have that viewpoint, that changed the market from a media company, because you had a lot of isolated publications or media platforms that, not web, but, you know, magazines, monthly or weekly, what have you, but they dealt specifically very vertically, broad. You didn't have the vertical strength that CMP was gearing at. They were ahead of their time, at the time.
So for CMP moving forward for that is, did they get bought out?
Yeah. Well, we went public. I think it was like in '97.
Okay.
It was
right before the tech boom, the dot-com boom. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I joined the company. I think we were sales at the time I joined '84. It was probably about 50 million, and the company ended up being bought for close to $1 billion.
Wow.
But I didn't get any of that money. By the way, just so everybody knows. That's why I'm still a working stiff. But I think having that media company presence in the industry and adapting to the different ecosystems as it built out, right? Was a big change in media, right? And you only had like back in the '80s, your original question, you probably had about 5 brands that mattered.
Okay.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And ironically, today you've got probably 50 brands that think they matter, right? So you have more choices, but that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. So back to the media aspect, because there's a lot involved with media back then. So how you reach your customers? You did the road shows. You could have gone, visiting customers, visiting your end customer, and also trade shows. I mean, trade shows I know were big still back. Were bigger, huge. Bigger. And you guys would probably have booths and trade booths, and that's really where you can network and schmooze and try to get in with a lot of your potential clients.
I think that was initially the lead source.
Yeah,
for
correct.
Many people. The old bingo cards, right? The publications would have those, right? And your conferences, it was very trade show dependent.
Okay.
Days of Electro, WestCon, what have you. There's others, but they've gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
But media has gone. I don't think it's adapted as well as it should have. Okay. I think there's, I'm kind of glad I'm not in media today. With a different company, Big Zeta, but I'm on the SaaS and software and development side. But media is a tough place to succeed right now.
Yeah, I mean that's I 100% agree with that tough. Because coming to '97 when you start just talking about when the CMP got purchased and acquired, that point was that mid '90s was the internet boom. Everything started coming to the internet. The mail, everybody got mail. You got mail. The AOLs and everything started coming. Websites started coming to play, right? Yeah. And then the search engines and things started coming to that point. And how there was always a transition. So can you explain to me, because you went through this, how was that transition from selling print to seeing what's happening on the internet and companies coming up and having search engines to find? Well, how was
it's freaking hard. Yeah. So I mean, truthfully, that's a big shift. That's probably the second, I think, inflection point, in media and high tech, was the web, how to adopt. Fortunately for me, I've been around smart people and good people, and it's always been about teams in my career, always. And for us to quickly, move to the web, all of our assets, at CMP at the time was a dangerous move, but yet it was a move that had to happen. So it was hard in terms of trying to understand computing and understand the network in terms of what that meant. There were no companies that had an infrastructure internally to adapt online, right? Just alone their presence online, let alone having to deal with media online. That was hard, and all the attention being driven to your customers and advertiser sites, was hard. I think in the first few years, I probably could have got more aggressive in terms of my knowledge. I took for granted a lot of things. That my brands at the time would be able to transcend that, right?
Well, because you're having successes in other things. Like, why do I need to go there when I'm already successful here?
Right? And at that time, I was no longer carrying a bag, if you will. I was in management. It's a problem in sales. You get good enough in sales, they move you into management.
They move you up.
Yeah. So I was lucky with that. So I think that forced me to start to pay attention after I think a year or so, and then I really got it. I got to learn. And I got to learn this quick, right? And it was easier for me to learn it than for my advertisers, customers, if you will, distributors and component manufacturers, to get it and adapt
and to sell it to them. To that, this is where you need to be.
You didn't have you didn't have webmasters. You didn't have that technical stack awareness, right? It just wasn't there, right? And I think that's to some degree, and maybe going to send a few people off on this, but that's part of the problem today. Some multiple years later, right, you still have some of these companies that aren't adapting.
They're resistant to change. You know, that really says back to the 90s, the dot-com boom, the 2000s. I mean, we're 20 years later from that point.
Yes.
And we're still facing some of the resistance to change because a lot of companies in general are become old school. They're not very digital advanced. And it does come from, at the end of the day, as we all know, it comes from leadership. If the leadership leads by example and says we want to do this,
we're coming from an industry that was, CEOs, presidents were all engineers, right? Yeah. Engineers make the worst marketers, smart guys and gals, but they're not great marketing people, right? And I remember when John Scully came over, took over Apple. I think he came from PepsiCo or something like that. It didn't work too well.
It didn't work too well. The vision.
It was a great idea
wasn't there.
Time.
Yeah, the great idea with the vision. I said to see the future and to understand and adapt with it. It's something. Even I could take that back. With my father was very into advertising. He spent a lot of money in the '90s. It was like Sourcebook, Source Today, whatever.
Did he spend it with me?
No, I think it was with Source, with Thomas Nett and Sourcebook. And not Buyers News. He did Buyers News a little bit, but I think it was Source. That's really where we put a lot of money into it. He was always a marketer himself, and that's why he traveled to Asia. You saw there's no more marketing out there. I started marketing, and if you listen to his podcast, that's really how he started. Yeah. He started marketing, and people in Asia started calling him saying, "We need components." He put an ad in a whatever Global Sources back then, whatever that was, but it was a publications before Global Sources. And they said, "Hey, I need this," and that's where he went. It's like people asked for it. But the marketing does work. It's like you need to be where the people are at. You need to be what's going on. And that transition to .com area and where we are today, the present day is, if you're not where the people are at, how can you show, and what, everybody's afraid to be there or to show their face or their company or even spend the money to get to dabble in it. There is a fear.
That's another great point on, when I first traveled to Asia in Europe, in media, it was in the 90s, right? Early 90s. And that was an awareness, an awakening for me, right? And then we had a chance, you mentioned Global Sources, we had a chance at CMP to create eMedia Asia. That's when we took EBN and E-Times over to China.
Correct.
Right? And that's where it was a partnership, and that's where we created that. That awakening, it was a whole different persona. First of all, we're dealing, it's not the same buyers and engineers you deal with here. Yeah, this is different than the manufacturing. That advantage, I think, to understand that, like if your father had that opportunity and yourself, because you got that travel, you've got to see how this works out differently because it's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same, and I think that
the culture has changed. The marketing's different, culture has changed, and a lot of things is, of course, we live in one of the greatest nations in the world. A lot of stuff we had was given, a lot of stuff we took for granted, but we realized that other cultures, other parts of the world, a lot of people are hungry and they want to move forward fast with technology and landscape and building. So, in that respect, that's really what the marketing has generated. So now coming back to say like the 2000s, when you get into 2000s in your experience. Where did everything change when the .com area came and everything started moving slowly, as we know, to digital?
Yeah. So the adaptation, I think, from media companies was hard. You had asked it earlier, and I think you asked about me, and it was hard. You had to learn. So that became I think a pivotal, an inflection point for a lot of media guys. They had to figure it out, and some of them didn't figure it out, right? There was still too much dependency on the print, the analog side of the business, right? Instead of digital. So it wasn't, for me, I was staying at CMP until 2003. And then I was going to, my time was up. I wanted to leave and do different things. And went to Hearst Media, came to work for a buddy of mine there.
Which is a big media company.
Right, so I'm thinking like Hearst Media, for God's sakes, the Cosmopolitan magazine, Popular Mechanics, what do they know? Well, it was fascinating. They had what your father probably grew up with, EEM, the EEM catalogs, right? So they had EEM, electronic products. It was kind of a business stagnant that they had owned from years past, and that had to. Our job was, when I came there, was we got to digitalize this company, right? Bring it to the forefront, because Hearst didn't. One thing Hearst never does, generally, is they hold on to things. They don't sell much, right? And they're a very, very, very well-driven company. But this high-tech division, so came there, and that was a chance to start over. Everything for me in media, right? So everything I learned in the errors that I made in the previous 19 years, with my buddy over here at Hearst, where are we going to go? It's all about the web. we don't see any media companies advancing progressively other than just trying to replicate what they had in print online.
Correct.
And we didn't have the luxury to do that, right? We could, but EEM wasn't digital, and electronic products, had to be. So we slowly evolved that. But then we had to look globally, right? Where are we going to take this? And we looked at China. We stumbled across, and I'm not going to give all the backdrop details, 21IC.
Okay.
21IC was essentially what became the largest technology portal in mainland China. And Hearst had a relationship with IDG in Beijing.
Okay.
Right? So because IDG wanted to launch the consumer books over there, and IDG had owned some technical pubs, that weren't necessarily mainstream in China, but okay, so the deal was we'll set up and we'll buy 21IC so that, like, in China, I mean, you got to give the government, they got to own part of your company.
They got to be, they have to have a share.
Yeah, if you want to be successful, you got to give the government a percent of the company. So we did, small percent, but, we launched 21IC, which was the first, I think, technology form built by engineers from the bottom up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it became, you're dealing with 13 to 18 million page views a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's like freakishly good, right? So we did that, and then we decided to pivot after that, keep that, and what's new for the web? How do you play with the web? I'm a print guy, but you learn, you try to figure it out. We found this company, called EEWeb Aspen Labs. Yeah. It was in Idaho. 2 engineers started this up. Yeah. One had worked at Micron as an engineer. The other one worked at LT, Linear Tech, and they were buddies, went to school together. Anyhow, they said, if you don't work for a big company, like a Rockwell, a Boeing, or Apple, or what have you, the chances of you having access to design tools is pretty limited because they're expensive. Yeah. So they want to launch some free design tools. That's a great idea.
Digital design tools.
Digital design, digital design tools. I remiss not coming back to that. So it's all digital based. Yeah. So, they launched an EEWeb website, which became essentially, this is arguable, I understand there'll be a few that are going to argue this, but EEWeb was the first, I think, truly US-based engineering form-based media. Okay. And it was it worked very, very well. And then Aspen Labs was, part of the company that would build these design tools. Okay. Right? And so, hey, somebody brought it to my attention, and, my partner, and said, hey, you got to take a look at these guys. Did. Let's partner up. And the unique thing, I think, with Hearst at the time, we created JVs that were just 3, but, JVs that were 50-50.
Okay.
Small board, skin in the game, it's easy. And when we did that revolutionized, I think, us to move forward on a much aggressive path to take advantage of digital presence and what it could do.
Because I think Aspen gave you the portal or the vision, like, wow, look where because this can take us and revolutionize our whole media platform itself.
Yeah, and it did. Yeah. It did for a long time. When I stayed there.
And what year was that?
That was probably, probably in the 2005, 2006, in that range, 2007, right? In great run. And I'm going to get a little ahead of things here, but I think the other, we got so good at what we did, but the other media companies were doing decent. We had to differentiate ourselves. And I think that's to the root of your question, right? And from a digital standpoint, what do you find that's unique for you? Because you can't keep doing banners and pages. I mean, come on, or newsletters and, what have you. So you find an angle. Our angle is to integrate and be creative. And I think you had one of our, great guy, Brian DeLuca.
Brian DeLuca, yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Brian. Brian's killer. Brian's killer. I think Brian was one of the...
fighter philosophy, man.
Dude, never mess with Brian.
I wouldn't either. You don't know what's... He'll put you in like an octopus, take you,
Wow, like you're Brazilian.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
Yeah, like multiple times over, right? Yeah. But Brian was Brian was part of that digital revolution for us. Brian was... our content director, editor, but he was more than that. He was, and you can see it today where Brian's head goes, but Brian was able to help advertisers understand that bridge of content what it means to have content, what it means to your reader, your user, whoever that may be, and how to digitize that and how to bring it forward, right?
The value that investing in the content.
And that was a big advantage having Brian with us at the time. And then, 2014 came around, right? The end of 2014.
And so from 2007 to 2014, you guys really evolved. So what was accomplished from 2007 to 2014 in Aspen Core? What was...
Well, it wasn't Aspen Core. So
it wasn't Aspen Core then. Okay.
Aspen Core didn't exist at the time.
Oh,
right?
okay. So 2000 and 2007.
So
you said you found the company to have two engineers.
We found that company, Aspen Labs.
Aspen Labs. Sorry, Aspen Core. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. It's Aspen Labs.
Well, that's okay. Well, it's confusing to the market.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe I blame Arrow on that. I can't blame Arrow.
So Aspen Labs was 2005.
Yeah, in that range.
Okay.
Aspen Labs, EEWeb, same company, right?
Okay.
So that's when we brought them into the fold as a JV with Hearst, right? And we did all these good things, right?
And started revolutionizing, digitalizing, taking everything from print to the online.
Well, Hearst was already print, and then we had already evolved online. We had to take the next step. You just, what can we do? And we found this engineering-based company that went to web. You need a form, communication path for engineer to engineer. Okay. You need design tools, right? How do you monetize that, right? And those kind of things. So that helped us, right? And then I think the big change after that, the successful things we did was to bring, I believe, in my opinion, engineering forms to the forefront. That was new. Bring digital design tools online and be able to find a way to monetize that respectfully, right? Which we did. And those were big, big changes. And I think, with Brian and some of the others that contributed to our editorial digital understanding, help educate our customers on how to better understand content contextually, how it relates to your reader,
correct?
Your customer,
our user,
our readers. Then the world flipped, right? When Arrow decided they wanted to be in the media business, and that's when they came to Hearst and.
So that's from right before we get there, because we'll get in depth there. Sure. I just wanted to understand that experience because there was a lot of publications and from Hearst, and then in that area, say 2010, you have because what I've realized, what I've seen is a lot of these companies are interrelated or they own each other and they have multiple different sites, right? Correct.
Yeah, if you're referring to, one media company might have 10 brands.
10 brands, right? So one media company does have 10 brands. And that point, I just want to get that perspective from you is how was that value as you guys are on the back end reading the data analytics? Was it always better to have multiple sites with engineering or manufacturing or distribution and everything scattered to different sites because you have different viewers? Or what was the vision of that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So, if you look at EBN, Times, or EDN, and Electronic Business, I'll just take some random brands. They're very vertical in their approach, right?
Correct.
One's buyers, engineers, and general business, right? And you can run those as independent brands. So that works, right? The value was in making sure that you had the content relative to the audience, right? Okay. And it was easier in the print days.
Okay.
It was easier. Yeah. You had a dedicated audience, right? That subscribe to you, for God's sakes, right? I want that. Yeah. And that's a good thing. I think what media didn't catch up to was, in my opinion, again, some are doing better with that than others today, but not understanding the persona, how it evolved. An engineer may have 5 different disciplines in terms of, what makes them up, right? It's not just electrical. Yeah. They could have computer science, they could have chemical, they could have hydraulics, they could, a lot of things they have to, work with different degrees. I don't think the media has appropriately bridged that uniquely. Thus, that led, I think, to the ability, you mentioned ThomasNet, right? ThomasNet, Tony's running a great company, he's done some great things there. Ex-CMPer, by the way.
Okay.
Shout out Tony. I like him a lot. He's done some really great things there. That they have really just one brand, essentially, ThomasNet, if you will, right? And they uniquely look at the industrial automation market. Well, the industrial automation control market is much like the electronics industry. You cannot separate the two. They've collided, just like the days when lighting came around. Right. Remember lighting when it was like
The biggest thing ever, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was a collision of solid state and mechanical that brought it together, and that forced the industry, I think, in a pivotal change, that had to adopt. Probably getting sidetracked a little bit here.
No, it's fine, no.
But it's this business, right?
Yeah.
It evolves, and you've got to be quick to fail. You got to evolve with it. You got to have a lot of smart people around you, right? And because as heads of state, if you're running a media company, you're not going to get it all. You can't stay on top of it.
I mean, as my experience, coming back to it, because I remember the advertising days. We had Thomas Nets, the EBNs, or also especially the Source, because they had three.
Sourcebook was great.
Sourcebook was it, and the biggest challenge I had with Sourcebook was like, oh, if you want to be in our online, you have to pay for the print. And I'm like, well, I don't want the print.
That was the mentality, right?
That was the mentality. I'm like, I don't want the print. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. The print is not what we want. We want to go online. We want everything online. It's like, oh, you have to spend X amount to get this spot. And I'm like, this makes no sense, guys. And that happened for many, many years. It happened like that because I'm like, I don't think this book is. I don't want to get this book that's like 100 pages. Every single region has one. I don't want to advertise in all these regions anymore. I just want to do it digitally.
Well, you asked that question, right? How tough was it, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great example. And we probably felt, in some levels, felt prey to that a little bit. If you advertise in EEM, as I was trying to wind it down from print, my orders given to me was get rid of this damn thing, right, and move it to digital. Well, I got to bridge all these guys and gals, that are advertising. So, that is a clear example of not doing it right. How do I monetize digital? I've got these print. How can I do it? So people were scrambling, trying to figure it out. And they didn't figure it out very well until later.
I agree. It took a little while. It took a lot of, I think, failures or successes and failures they had to go through and trials and tribulations to figure it out. And that internet, and that's why, as my question was, why is there so many different sites? Because now today I look at a lot of these companies, a lot of them have the same type of information. Yeah, they can be more engineering, more power, automation, or, whatever distribution. But I'm like, I would say 50% sometimes it's the same information and they add in some other things.
I think there's too many. Listen, I said it tongue in cheek that I'm glad I'm out of the media business because it's hard. And content has been commoditized. I would argue, again, people will argue with me on this, but I don't think you have the editorial stewardship and brand icons in the market anymore that were go-to for people and recognized. And the commoditization of editorial, think of it this way, right? So all of your advertisers are your competitors. Yep. Right? So I don't, you can look at any big manufacturer or of components or distributor, they're in the content business.
Yep.
And they're your competition. So if you're in media, what's the next gig, the next new angle that you can play out? A good example would be, conferences. Virtual conferences and this and that. Shout out to EE Tech.
Yeah.
Right? They just had I think it was Tech Days, and they had like 36,000 registrants. That's freaking crazy, right? That's really good. So maybe they hit a sweet spot in COVID and the timing, right? Well, and they had great speakers, but you've got to find that next angle, and that's where I struggle. I do. If you're so let me spin it out this way.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to spin this up, right? So all those years in media, there's a lot of questions that you folks out there never asked me, whether I was selling ads directly, carried a bag, or whether I was advantaged and I had my teams deployed. There's a lot of questions you never asked. Shocking to me. I wouldn't avoid them if you asked, but you didn't ask, so I'm not going to bring it forward. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about, and we fast forward now. So the value I had, or media companies, is our audience, right?
Correct.
Okay. So now we're in digital world. So let's just move to digital world. So how do I validate, authenticate, and verify that? That's hard.
Yeah.
But the technology's there to do it, but the component manufacturers, the advertisers and distributors have not challenged media. Tell me, media company ABC, what's your monthly engagement and define engagement of your user base? Yep. And you're going to get a bunch of humana, and
they don't measure it accurately.
Well, they don't. Everybody's got Google Analytics. Yeah. Big deal, right? I care less about page views, but it's engagement, right? And that's the key. And that's where you, IBS and others, are moving digitally to, like your site, right? You're creating a site that you want engagement and you want conversion.
Conversion, yeah.
That's simple. So these media companies, and I say there's too many, I do think there's way too many. You don't need them. Everybody could be in the publishing business. I think there's a few media companies that are out there because everybody was up for sale and spun. Let's just get real, right? Yeah. So when Arrow bought Hearst / EEWeb, Aspen Labs, that started the push, right? And everybody was up for sale because they're looking at the margins. I mean, the multiples, and that's great. And some didn't make it. So Arrow wasn't the only one that bought somebody, right? You had, I think you had Mauser that bought Electropages, right? And, so the media companies today, there will be a fallout. There will be. We've already seen acquisitions. Global Spec, from IEEE got sold off to VC. Endeavor bought all the the old UBM or Penton stuff.
Penton stuff, yeah.
So that will change again, and I think the people that make that change are going to be the ones that are clever enough to come up with the next value.
The vision.
That you need. And there's no connection between on-site and off-site, right? I kind of look at it that way. Whatever you do on your site, and we'll get into that later, right? But what you as an advertiser do on your site has got to match, and you got to force off-site efforts that are coming in feeding you, right?
Correct.
And that is disconnected. I think in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a lot of good points and understanding. I hope people listen to that. There's a lot of wisdom and experience there because it is true. And some people
a lot of suffering
and understanding. Yeah. Even for myself, to be 100% honest, I'm not a marketing guy. I was a business guy. I was thinking how to create operations, how to expand, how to hire management, how to bring people. I never even got into marketing. And I saw that for us I'm like, okay, there's something needs to change. Yeah. I need to change marketing. So that's really, all the marketing digitalization, really changing the branding and the message and the image and building awareness. At the end of the day, marketing is also building awareness. Once you build awareness, you start educating people, you start building credibility, and then people start wanting to listen. And then you start earning sometimes a seat at the table to get the opportunity that you were looking for because of this engagement that you've gone through something else. And at the end of the day, it's showing up every day and being where the people are at and putting something out there, even if it's 10 people watching or it's 10,000 people watching, it's better than zero.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are zero.
Yeah. So this is the types of things that you call about how do we evolve and move forward. So before we can get to all the forward, but I would like to start back at the point of going to the 2014 days. Let's go back and take a little reverse.
How did Aspen Core come around?
Yeah, let's start. I want to go where Aspen Core is.
So, okay, without giving too much, but I think I'm beyond the handcuffs days,
Correct.
Litigation, and everything like that. So, Arrow wanted to be in the media business, but that's not entirely true. My take on it essentially was, we had this media company, Hearst Business Media, that included EEWeb and Aspen Labs, and Aspen Labs had some pretty cool tools, right? So, and Arrow was pretty progressive, at the time back then. They had bought Transom, they created, they were Silicon Expert.
Silicon Experts, yeah.
That company was expanding out an ecosystem, pretty aggressively. So, I think, they were, truth be told, they were very interested in Aspen Labs and the design tools, right? And fortunately, the management at Hearst. Again, I don't want to give names out, but my buddy and my other buddy at Aspen decided to say, "What do you think?" And I said, "Let's not. I agree with you guys. You guys run with it." Arrow was going to probably go around us if we said no.
Yeah. Okay.
So position as you want EEWeb, Aspen Labs, you got to buy the whole thing, which included EAM and Hearst. The Hearst Electronics Group. That happened, and that was closed out in February 2015.
Okay.
Right, and me and another fellow were, along with the appointees at Aspen Core didn't exist. We had this media, so that shocked the world, right? Everybody was freaking out.
So at that time, I want to understand. Yeah. So when that acquisition happened, it bought all the assets and the people came with it,
yes,
or the restructuring happened?
No, the people all came with it,
okay.
And it was built into their Silicon Expert and Transom business, which became the Media and SaaS Group.
Okay,
right, separated from, if you will, Arrow Core. Now, you got a fundamental problem quickly. You've got one of the world's largest distributors that just bought a media company, of which 30+% is all distribution funded, advertising. Well, that's going to go away, right? and the belief to think that everybody could live in the same sandbox and that this media group could be agnostic. I was willing to sign on, for 3 years and play it out, as long as I could be honest and everything else, which was pretty much the case. But it wasn't. It had to get bigger. Arrow wanted it bigger. The fellas that run it, so they said, "Hey, here's a checkbook. Go buy everybody that you want. Go find and what's it going to take?" Literally, right? So
monopolize the market, like basically that type of thing. Let's take over everything. Yeah.
So let's go see what we can buy. Well, we went back and we bought, essentially my old alma mater. We bought that, right? E Times, EBN, EDN, because that had already merged with UBM Group, and we bought that. We acquired. Half a dozen properties overseas. I mean, in Europe and EMEA. All of a sudden, we had 30 or 40, brands globally. So, okay, this is a great story. But you got to play it out right. You better have a pretty good strategy. The name Aspen Core was a struggle, and actually, me and two fellows were in a rainy, stormy drive in Shanghai one night, heading back to the hotel. We're struggling.
One night in Shanghai.
Yeah, one night in Shanghai.
One rainy night in Shanghai, yeah.
It was a movie or so, wasn't it? I don't know. It was a song or something. I remember that, we had looked at all kinds of ideas, Aspen this, because it's Colorado. That's where Arrow was, and everything was taken. And we're driving back, and I'm sitting in the back seat, and I just throw out stuff. One of our leaders was in the front seat, and me and my sidekick were in the back. And, we're kicking around, and somehow I must have said core or corp.
Corp or core, yeah.
Yeah,
something like that.
It was probably like that. And then the light went on, Aspen Core, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And that wasn't bought, so we secured the name the next morning, in China. And then, the rest was history from there. That became the brand, the holding brand, if you will, of all the
entities. Right?
All the entities.
Okay.
No, not Silicon Expert, Transom, but all the media brands.
All the media brands that you guys acquired and brought in. Okay.
Yeah. And the ownership of a lot of the research, Can I take a step back for a minute?
Go for
it. Trying to get in this business and learn it. Okay, you asked that earlier, right? Research was key to me. I was always fascinated, right? And I learned that this market needed research. I learned that early at EBN. We had the buyer survey that was done back in the 80s. Really late 70s it was started. And it basically, who do you buy from?
Correct.
And every distributor in the world, at EDS back in the day, right, would line up to hear that data. Where I'm at. So there was brand identity tied to the movement of the needle, right, within that buyer pool. That was fine. But moving ahead, I launched, I don't forget when it was in the 90s, probably maybe 99, whatever. I launched the supplier interface survey study, which was very engineering driven. By that time, I was kind of moving off EBN.
One thing I realized I'll try is you do a lot of surveys, and everything that I've seen about you, which is fantastic because you want to get information and data to collect. That data, as you say, is the most important thing. Is I need to get data to make a calculated decision, to learn something and go through it. And people don't really realize that. And even at the breakout session that we had at ERA, a conference, you came in with a survey. You came in with information. I remember, I'm like, this guy has a survey. I surveyed this and I went through this, and it's very powerful that I've realized. I've listened to some of I've nerded out. I listened to some of your other videos at different conferences, ECIA or something, and every time you come up and speak, you have data from a survey. And I'm like, okay, this is value.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
Or you don't have to, but if you don't, it's silly. But that gets to engagement, right?
Correct.
If you've got a relationship, I used to do so many focus groups.
Yeah.
Where I'd sit.
Something focus group too.
Focus groups. I would sit. I probably have done 50 or more focus groups over the years where I sat in a room for an advertiser and undisclosed, right, with engineers or buyers, and you just query and go with it, right? Research, even better when you have Mind of the Engineer, which was acquired. That was an EDN study that we later, after we bought EE Times and EDN, at Aspen Core, reported that study. The supplier interface study, some of the I think web design tool studies, or like you said on disruption, I did a few polls and have brought in some research on that. You have to get a pulse of where things are at. It's great if you can't sit back on your laurels and say, here's my opinion. Opinions are one thing, right?
There are assumptions or what I think is going to happen, what people are thinking.
But have some data points, right, that kind of validate where you're going. So that's a good point. And there's not enough of that done. I will say research, and then we'll move on. But you've got Mind of the Engineer that's still done. The newest one's out. I think it leaves a little bit whole. Or left. There's some holes in it. I know E-Tech's got their study coming out probably in a month. Penton does some good stuff, right? I know in Europe, my old study I just found out is being done. So I was giving that publisher a hard time. He's a good friend. He was giving him a hard time. Like, dude, you got to start paying me royalties.
Yeah, royalties for what you're using.
So if advertisers don't see this, or don't recognize that data that's there, that's important. They should be seeing it. And I don't think the media companies do
I don't
a good
think it's
job.
just even external. I think it's also internal. I don't think companies survey their teams enough that they should be asking questions. So it's both. It's external, of course, because your audience, but internal of your internal team, survey, hey, what's going on? Ask some questions. Everything okay? What should we do? Do you think we're going? And this data, as you say, it helps you make a calculated decision that where you want to go, where you're going to invest in, and what you need to change to improve. Right. So these are a lot of the things that I think that the value that discussions that we've had and the things that I've seen is really, I can see where your mind's always at is research. It's just like you said, you brought that up, is researching.
I just look at a note.
Yeah.
I always have to make notes, to make sure I know what the heck or where I'm going or what I may forget. But I'll put that aside for a minute. I'm a fanatic about whiteboards and notes. In my office. Just that visual stimulation. But research is key. Or data. Let's talk about data for a minute, right? Because I think you kind of touched on the value of media companies. I think that was in your pecking list there somewhere. Are they valuable? Yeah. They can be. I don't think all of them are. I think we'll get back to, if you harken back to what I said earlier about, validate, authenticate, and verify my user base as a media company. You're going to buy from me, you better dang well be able to verify that to your customer base. And I urge every component manufacturer, distributor out there, media guys are going to hate me on this, but you need to ask every one of your media, before you spend money, you ask hard questions on engagement. So you understand that your media select understands their audience, the persona, they have them engaged, how they're engaged, you cookie crumb that, right?
Correct.
And that's not asked enough. And I think a lot of times you have the media salespeople kind of live on the brand, right? My brand's really good, you need it, that's great, and you're dealing with, maybe some lower level media in the company, and they're getting better, you got a guy named Matt. Yeah. And Matt's killer. Yeah. He's going to ask hardball questions.
Correct.
And I think that shows the new, I know we're going to get
perspective. The new,
or the inflection point of the market with all the youth coming in, right? Correct. Or new thinkers.
Yeah.
There's probably a better way to say
new thinkers. Yeah.
Yeah. So, close that. I think we talk about research, but you can get a lot more research about the persona and the user base that's coming to you from the media company. Yeah. And then you're going to capture it on your own site. That's a whole different problem, right? Oh, yeah. Matching up your marketing stack to your tech stack, that's a big problem. Yeah. That's not happening efficiently enough.
I mean, I agree with all this data because I don't think enough. I mean, I admit it too. I mean, it's not like it's something else. We didn't do enough of it in the past 10 years. And now in the past couple of years, we're like, okay, we really need to get this information. This really to give us a strategy and direction because of this. Before it was, we had our customer base, we did some marketing here, we visited them, we did this. But at the end of the day, there's so much new turnover and new people coming in. And at the end of the day, it is branding. You have to
So turnover, you mean in your customer base or within your company, or
both? What? Both. Okay. I mean, especially customers have much more employees. They're much more many more engineers, many more buyers, commodity guys, and management. At the end of the day, is you being psychologically in their mindset of knowing the brand, who it is, and when you try to approach them, say, "Hey, I remember your name." For like IBS, I remember I saw something with you guys. Hey, yeah, I'll give you opportunity.
So let me challenge you on something.
Correct.
I'm gonna throw this out. You tell me what you think. So, do you believe you own your own brand? Do you believe the IBS brand? Do you own it?
No.
Okay. Who owns it?
I think that it's in the world of the webs. I think the people own it. The customers own it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right? I think if you ask that question with most companies, you're not going to get I support. I believe that too. Yeah. You don't own your own brand. Your customer does. All you can do is is move and persuade and manipulate, if you will. It's a bad word, but you want to manipulate that brand into an appreciable adoption as a customer, so they love you, right? And they're going to use you. But to believe that you own your brand,
it's funny you asked me that question now. Because you'd asked me about 2 years ago, I would have said I owned it.
Yeah.
Our company owns the brand.
Yeah.
I would have never thought about looking outside the box. I'm like, wait a minute. We don't own it. We are, the other way. It's turned it the other way around here. Our customers own our brand. They know our image. They own all of that. And it's what they perceive of who we are. It's not the brand. I mean, we're trying to create a great fantasy, thing around it. Everything that goes around our psychology our basically, I would say our mission statement, our vision of who we are. But that mission, vision, ethical company morals, ethics, it actually comes off to the customer more than you think it does.
It does.
Because it's complete off of that. I mean, you got to walk the walk and talk the talk at this. You walk the walk, but also it's you're talking about it, walking it, executing, and that's a big thing. And showing up. And being consistent.
Well, showing up the right way.
Yeah.
I know that's everybody, you get that. But, I don't know that people, if you look at, in my opinion, again, you look at salespeople in the distribution business or component business, I don't know how many of them are really made the transition from onboard to offboard. What do I mean by that?
Okay.
You could sell sensors all day long to a company. I work for a distributor, I sell sensors. Okay, but do I understand once I leave the board and move on to outside that board, all of the technology implications that are affecting that or implicating that, where it could go? Yeah, selling peripheral products associated to a sensor.
What it plugs into, what it goes into,
Yeah, even security or cloud-based issues, things like that, right? I don't think many people, that hasn't been a push forward enough to credit. And the same thing falls on media. When you have media salespeople, and I don't know, Rob, whether you talk to media salespeople. Maybe Matt
I have a lot, and recently, no.
And so
recently, before I did, yes.
And how'd that go for you?
Not so good, because everything they're trying to sell, sometimes I feel like I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room, but sometimes I feel like I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me something that I already know, and you're trying to sell me something that doesn't make any. I mean, you know what you're selling, and.
Biggest problem, right on, and that's, I think, you asked earlier about the bridge between print to digital, right? Okay, let's go there from the media standpoint, right? How many media reps understand or have come in to articulate and navigate a scenario of your technical stack and capabilities on your site and understand the generalities? They don't have to be developers, they don't have to be engineers, but can really understand that and then align and ask you, what is your strategy? Well, I want to sell more. Okay, great. How are we going to do that, right? And be able to really clearly bring in assets that they represent that can accomplish that, right? I hate to say, it's very few and far between. Now, part of the problem is a lot of people don't want to go into media sales. It was a great business. I did really well in my life. I learned a lot. I wouldn't have changed it at all. Yeah. Exciting, but I think today, finding new media representatives is extremely hard. Most people don't want, just like design engineers don't want to be, kids going to school don't want to be electrical engineers. They want to go to work for Google or Facebook.
Be software, the sexy part of it,
dev guy.
Tech, development. This, what? Yeah. Okay, so moving forward from there, I think this is a great topic, great discussion that we just had, because those are a lot of points that sometimes are not discussed enough.
I think you need to be disruptive. Yeah. It is time for this market to be challenged challenge itself, right? We're just, it just needs to happen. Yeah. And I think once we get, we're past that inflection point of age, right? This will be dominated by 30 and 40-year-olds within 5-6 years. It will be to some degree. I mean,
it's the evolution of succession coming in and taking over and taking it to another level and evolving it. And right now we're having we're in that inflection or path that people are the resistance is still there. The resistance is still fighting against the new, and what it does is it takes that new generation and it veers them off the road that they can. It veers them off somewhere else, right?
Yeah, it does. That's a good point.
Yeah,
it's right on. This is not a sexy business in most people's minds, which is crazy.
Well, it used to be. It used to be very high.
I still think it is, right?
I mean, like the image, it still is. But the image was much more attractive in the 80s and 90s, and now it's...
Well, in the 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when you'd go to places, we were young. I mean, you weren't there at the time, but that new market, I mean, as things evolved, you go to a conference now, and you and I have talked about this, and you see an audience with a lot of gray hair.
The demographic is completely,
and that's got to change.
Yeah. I agree. The demographic will change. We'll get to that thing for the demographic side. Let's now go to, we were with Aspen Core and Labs with Arrow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get back and really...
You're good at this, man. You're moving. Go.
This topic of where that really went, and I know that you were there for a few years, and really what that transitioned to. And the one thing I want to ask is how was that managed? Did Arrow Corporate have the final say or tell you the direction to do, or were you guys free to make a decision?
Wow. Okay. This is like real talk, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, full disclosure, my opinion. So let's talk about that. Okay. So 2015, I've already explained, they buy, okay, we go out and buy all these other great brands, right? It was AeroCore, it was structured to be separated. And it was for the most part. I'll qualify that most part in a second, but it was, right? Their management in terms of their sales or VPs or directors that were selling parts on the Aero side, were they calling and interfering? Hey, who's advertising? And can I see the leads from somebody? Which was the big problem. Listen, I had 10 of the CEO / presidents of the distributors, which I'm fortunate enough to know from hanging around long enough, right? And good people. Hey, Cholas, I need assurances from you that if I spend money, and the money I'm spending, that Arrow will never see any information or analytics or data from my efforts. And I said, you have my word. And the day I hear different or know different would be the day I leave. Well, it would be the day I leave. Because this was new grounds, but it was dangerous in my mind. Dangerous in the sense that you really got to be clever to make it work. Really got to be clever. You're going to alienate an entire channel audience. They're not going to spend money with you. They're not going to give you. And you could try to package it any way you want, but at the very basic, the problem was for distribution was I'm not going to spend money to support Arrow.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's like, why would TTA come and give money to Arrow to advertise for them? I mean, and in general, because that's what it was.
Yeah,
right? Why would that? Let's make it to be simple. That's what I'm not going to give my money there because they're going to just take my data and use it against me. And that's what in my mindset.
Well, sure. And I from a media standpoint, can I assure you that that's never going to happen?
Yeah.
I couldn't 100% today tell you that it didn't happen. It didn't happen knowingly by me, and I'm not saying that it did, but I get the mindset. So the channel leaves, right? So you buy all these brands and you build this kind of momentum, globally. The idea was really glorious, elegant, sexy. I get it. You're going to open, you do all these things, but quickly to run a media company, that's where you're getting at. To run a media company like you're running a distributor, that's the interference that happened.
I think you should really watch that movie, Social Dilemma. I think it really shows, even though it's a digital world, but really it's what we're discussing.
I'm going to make a note of this.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. Anybody else out there?
I haven't watched it yet.
Watch the Social Dilemma, because what we're discussing of data and how they manipulate and how they can use it against you and use the user is something that's this is how it discusses, and it turns the whole thing around as saying you are, instead of being when the platform is free and for the users, for ourselves, you become the product because that company is selling your data. You're the user. They're taking your data and selling it to their users, and that's why this valuation. You are the user. We are the product, and that company is buying our data and trying to push us to sway our persuasion of what we want to buy and what we like.
Never should somebody else know your customer base better than you.
Yeah.
Or persona.
Correct.
The characteristic, the nuances, and that's unfortunately how a lot of companies run today. Yeah. I mean, let me qualify. The distributors and manufacturers, component guys, how well do they know their audience? especially since it's been digitized. Because you can't see them all.
They take that interpersonal disconnected, and that's the one thing. I mean, we can talk about the Mausers and DigiKeys, and they're very successful. The platform, everybody, which, oh my God, we should have done that. We should have done this. Everything's past tense at that point. But how well do they know their client base who's buying from their websites?
So look at today. If you look at this media, because we're still on media, it's all about engineering. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I get it. It's not all about engineering. You do have buyers and supply chain operations and manufacturing. You do have collision of industries that are coming together. You do have engineers that have 4 different discipline responsibilities. So it's not all hardware EEs, right? And that is part of the problem where I think media hasn't gravitated to accommodate that. Some companies are doing pretty good with that. And they're attempting, but most not. That'll be a lot of the fallout. Yeah. Again, I get back to way too many choices right now. Yeah. You don't need these many choices. No.
There's way too. Yeah, I agree.
You just don't.
So now let's move on to the present day, and let's talk about 2018 and forward, really with Big Zeta, right? And really, how did this come about, and where you guys started, and where you are today?
I didn't think we would ever get to that.
Yeah, we're there. Yeah.
So, excuse me. So Big Zeta. So during the ending period of Aspen Core. And if I look back at all the years and the great people I learned from and the customers that I was able to engage with, when I was time to leave in 2018, it was February, but the writing was on the wall for me. It was pretty well done with this. I couldn't continue. But what was missing? Well, Arrow had, Aspen Core, we created, the studio. And ideally, the idea with the studio was to help companies, even Kickstarter, Indiegogo type companies, which I did for a while, part of Aspen Core, but also, your advertisers help build their websites, right? Okay, well, that didn't pan out too good, right? So me and the guy I went to work for now, most people know. I mean, I'm not going to bring his name up because he just likes to be a little silent.
The man behind the myth, the legend.
The myth, the legend. But we knew. I'll say we. We knew there was a hole, and that was for component manufacturers and distributors. Website dysfunctionality existed. Staffing internally at those companies to adequately build out and pay attention. Let's take search, for example. That's a great point to take a look at first. So search is kind of an afterthought. The CEO gets pissed or some VP gets pissed because I can't find memory on my site. Where's the other? And he calls up the webmaster or the tech guy and, or calls up IT inevitably. And IT says, I don't know, call the web guy, and, those things, you had all that disconnection. So we knew that how could we build a company for multiple entry points financially for engagement is, how we could help out build a digital presence that very simply would allow for engagement and conversion. And then we get into e-commerce, So we had to build a team for that. And fortunately, we started slow, 3 of us essentially, and it was basically say, hey, we're going to convert all your PDFs to HTML. Okay. Because Google doesn't give PDFs a lot of love.
Yeah. The rank,
Yeah, just they don't. It's got so much great. So that kind of was beginning, but we had bigger pictures. Fast forward today, because I think I have to fast forward. As things evolved at Arrow, but Transom, which was their acquired tool business, right, where they made design tools for manufacturers. It was a German acquisition, that started to dissolve. Okay. Whether it was culturally or whatever, it just did. A slew of people over there that were very smart, young, smart. And I mean, both developer, software, hardware, AI, ML people that were freakishly good, right? Okay, so we knew that would ultimately, we'd like to be in that business. And as those people left, they're kind of, filling our hole, right? Yeah. And that was important. And then we're not going to be in the data business, meaning Silicon Expert, IHS, or Z2 Data, which is, Omar's newest company that's out there, who originally founded Silicon Expert. Those 3 companies pretty much own the data business. we're not in that. But the Silicon Expert peep, we needed some data experts, and we got one. So today, from 2 people, fast forward, it's only been 2.5 years. 30 customers globally and 160 employees, a very heavily engineering dev office.
And I can say that I've been working with them, my team's been working with them, and they have some very structured, very intelligent, and they know what they're doing, and they've made us think. And that's a lot of companies doing. I've had our last website, and I got to give it to you. You and your team and your partner's team are unbelievable how professional and how structured they are and what they are doing. I think that's that you guys are evolving fast, learning. Yes. And for that, I my hat's off to you, because I didn't know. You're all I remember when I met Steve's like, you know what? I want to do, I'm going to come meet you and do your website. And don't worry, I'll make it work for you. Whatever it takes, I'm going to build your website. But you know what? As the typical salesperson, I will make it work. Whatever, we'll fit in with your budget.
I think you gave, budget, but I think you gave me a little rope to hang myself.
Yeah.
It challenged me, and I appreciate that. It worked out. Listen, I just wanted the opportunity to earn your business. And I try to tell anybody, whether I'm talking to the CEO, president, director, it doesn't really matter. I just want a chance to earn your business. And if I can do that, my team can do that, and that's good. I'll go back to this Big Zeta, because the assets that we do, full website development, yes, all the way through to back end. Yes. But you got to have a good UI UX team. Yeah. You got to have some really cool design that understand this business. And that was another thing, right? We wanted to launch a business where you don't need to tell us the difference between a catfish and a capacitor. I said that earlier. We got it. We've got those data experts. And if you take me out of the mix, what's fascinating, I think the average age of this 160 employees is probably in the late 30s, maybe nearing 40 if you remove me, But they all kind of grew up in this market, right? So they get it, and that's important. You got
to say, I give it to his mindset still at that age. He's at the median age, his mindset's still there. Doesn't look, but this man's got a lot of energy.
Hey man, I learning a new business, but okay, to that point.
Yeah.
So Big Zeta, we knew that we were on a collision course, with media.
With media itself, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Right. I know I say I'm not in the media business, but we're an enabler. So all you media guys out there, I'll tell you right now, all of you media guys and gals, when you're selling media to your customer base, our job is to make that customer base be more responsible for engagement and conversion of what you're bringing to them. And that's why I say you advertisers need to spend more time challenging and make sure that the audience that you're spending money to be drawn to your site is the right audience. And if you build the right web environment, digital presence, you will get engagement.
Yeah.
And that's very cool, is to be able to have all that.
I 100% agree. And it's, you're right. You're going to go head on with a lot of companies, like what are these guys, what are you doing, what they're, and having the know-how, having the experience, and getting all this talent pool that's been in industry or has, as I said, bringing it in, organizing it, giving the platform what the future is, and understanding it too. I think a Big Zeta as well, you guys understand the user. That's the number one thing. You understand the user of,
we do.
And you know how they think, how they breathe, how they move, and and you anticipate what their next move, and that's the number one thing. You have to anticipate.
Intent. You're good. You have paid attention. So I'll tell you that. But you're right. In each one of those disciplines on the tech stack, we talk about that. Everybody's got a tech stack, and it's functional. Hopefully, you try to get it there. Yeah. But you've got to have, if you have the right team of people that understand how engineers use design tools and why they use them. Okay, we got that. How people use data and why they're using it. We got that group of people. What's the current direction for a UI UX that capitalizes and optimizes what you need? We got those people, right? It makes it really easy for me, because you've got the right people. But that's been the godsend for us, I think, is having that.
I think it is for the point of the industry is we're the biggest hidden secret. We're a massive industry, but with everybody knows each other. But at the end of the day,
This is still a people business, though.
Yeah.
I want to preface this, and people forget that, but this is still a people business.
I 100% agree, but I think the people business is being because, well, we're in a pandemic, so that's a little challenging. And which I want to get to is right now,
Sure,
I mean, with Big Zeta, you know, what you guys have done and accomplished and all the things, but and from your discussion, your breakout session of disruption, now going into, we were there in February 28th, whatever, 26th, whatever, in February. We discussed it. There was a breakout session. There was a keynote speaker, economics. Oh, yeah, don't worry. I mean, everybody was very positive.
Well, the market was high. You look at valuations. It was great.
And that disruption that you talked about, that whole discussion that we did, what's going to happen in the marketplace, 3 weeks after that, everything stopped. And we were like, everybody's like, what are we going to do?
Go figure. So what's your question?
Well, my question comes to for how Big Zeta has transformed through this age and how it's used your guys' core competencies to actually be more powerful through this last 6-7 months and be able to sell, okay, we know it, we got it, we see it, and we can get in front of a user because it's a people business. Right now, we can't see anybody.
You can't. You can Zoom.
So how is that transition for you guys?
So I want to say this in the most correct way. Okay. You know, COVID has been really good for us in terms of attention to what we can do, right? Okay, so everybody, you know, this is obvious. Everybody's been forced to understand, you know, no sales calls, no live this and that, you know, so we've got to engage digitally. Well, most companies weren't ready for that, you know, and I mean that, you know, we've done, you know, go to meetings and Zoom and stuff a little bit. Zoom took off, right? But most companies weren't digitally aware of what their holes were. So here's what I'll say. Whether you're a $10 million company or whether you're a $20 billion company, and we have customers that make up that, you all share one thing in common, you know, the ones that need help, and is that you've got holes. So that digital presence, you know, Rob, is, you know, and has forced people, you know, COVID has forced these the companies to take a look at that, and they're freaking out, a lot of them, you know, and it's easily fixed. You know, it's not for the faint of heart, you know, and, you know, it could be expensive, but, you know, we've found ways to make it easy for people, right? And that was another thing. I'll say that. Listen, you want to be a good customer. I mean, you want to have good customers that trust you and what have you. Sometimes you got to have skin in the game, and you find entry points that work for them, you know, that aren't always in your behalf, but you find common ground. And we've done that, right? So I would say this, that all digital problems are fixable relative to your website. They're fixable. And I think what COVID's done is brought it to the forefront. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's crazy. I could spend, you know, 100 hours a week and not touch everybody that needs some help, right?
Well, it is. I think the scaling, which you hit some points there, that can be a $10 billion company or $1 million company, for example. Yes. You know, it doesn't matter what industry. Everybody has it, but the toughest challenge, in my opinion, maybe I'd be wrong, is the bigger companies have a tougher challenge because there's too much levels and scale. They have too many people. They don't understand it as much.
Totally. And
for them to change the messaging, and of course, for me, or as you know, I've created this as every salesperson is not a mirror, it should be a brand within that brand of the salesmanship. Those salespeople didn't have any identity. Now they're realizing, oh my God, I need to have an identity.
You know,
go ahead.
Just real quick. So I always thought about, you know, as a sales guy, when I was in sales, you know, I'm always a sales guy, right? We always are. I was very concerned about my brand, my identity.
Your identity,
and that's knowledge, right? Correct. You want to have why you do research, why you have a chance to know everybody.
Correct.
Right? I want my personal brand to never go away, you know, wherever I end up. So
everybody knows Steve. Everybody knows his personal brand. They know who he is, and because he's a full of knowledge and he has experience, right?
I have a mustache, so that makes it a lot easier for people.
No, overall, but that's what I'm saying is I think that disconnect is, or it's not a disconnect. That whole it showed all the as you analogy use showed all the holes that people have in their sales teams in the reps. I mean, in electronic industry, from the reps to the actual sales team, the distributors to the manufacturing side, you can see all the holes were exposed.
They were. Yeah, and more are coming, but yeah.
And I mean, no one's going to admit to it, but a lot of people are running around behind the scenes like, oh my God, trying to talk to you. What do we do? What do we change? How do we pivot? How do we move forward? How do we embrace? I don't want to get in front of a camera. I don't want to show my face. I don't want to get on camera. And at the end of the day, it's like, you look the same walking into a meeting than you do on the camera. You're the same person. Yeah. Why are you afraid to show your face? Like, I'm embarrassed. I'm like, well, are you embarrassed to go in front of talk to each other in person? This is that psychological mindset of that is really mind-boggling for me, is that change of how we can really enhance it and use it to our advantage, because that's really where we're going. Well, in my opinion, we're only moving forward. And a lot of people in the first 3, 4, 5 months thought, oh, this is going to end.
Yeah,
we're going to go back to normal. There's going to be a new normal. We're going to evolve. We're going to pass this thing and everything's going to change. And nothing will be like it ever was before. So don't think you're going to wait, twiddling your thumbs,
I agree. It's not going to be the same. Forget the mask thing, but it's not going to be the same, because what's been exposed is the ability and those holes that are now uncovered, and exposed, right? They're going to be fixed, and that changes the game.
It changes the game. I mean, there's a lot of holes that we've seen everywhere, from the world, politics, countries. Everything has been exposed because people had to change the way they live and process for a short time. Hopefully, it'll be end soon, and then we'll get to a new normal. But over that is back to our industry. It really showed that hole. And now what I see is with Big Zeta, what you guys are doing, and what other companies, you haven't seen what other companies are really doing. You haven't seen them really out in the forefront. Like right now we're discussing this openly, but you haven't seen anything going on. I am a researcher.
What do you mean by that, though?
You haven't seen any type of change of strategy of in our industry of people. I've seen some effort. I can see, hey, I nerd out. I watch everything. I want to get the data, just like collect, okay, what's everybody doing? And I can see some people try to make their change. I've talked to some of these C-level people and some of these other distributors, and they've told me too, hey, I put competitions that people brand themselves, put themselves in, or and what everybody's doing is, all they're doing is they're not building value or a message or human connection. They're just taking this piece of paper that came from the factory and just posting it again on the wall. What type of brand, what is this going to do for, everybody? And this is...
what makes it worse is when you take, some of those that just think of that, and then you go to their website and there's like, what the hell? Right? The connection is not even,
well,
that even makes it worse.
I got no offense to all the reps out there. There's some very successful. You guys are awesome, that rep, but a lot of you, I mean, the websites of some of these I've researched, I'm like, why aren't you an extension of the representatives of these manufacturers?
Oh, you mean the manufacturers' reps, their websites.
Their websites.
Oh, no need in their mind, right? No need. Which is shocking to me. Shocking to me. It's funny. Okay, talk about data points. Yeah. Over 60% of the touch points that happen live, and now digitally, but live, if you will, in the U.S. with engineering are done by reps, not by distributor salespeople, FAEs. And FAEs, that whole FAE thing is changed. So 60 plus, maybe 70% of all touch points, manufacturers' reps. Yet their digital presence leaves a lot to be desired, and they're counting on their manufacturer that they represent or their distributor they're trying to work with.
To do the work for them.
And it doesn't work.
They don't bring, and that's at the end of the day, is the value that I think manufacturers are seeing now. What value do these reps bring? Because I'm passing through everything, and they're not even showing me of a presence of a website or... Because if I want to put Steve Cholas on the internet on Google, everybody does. If you come present me, you come and try to sell me something. The first thing I do is Google you. Yeah. Who are you? Where's your DNA? Should I do business with this guy, or should I give this guy an opportunity?
Especially if I never knew you before, right?
Yeah, and I go to your website, and your website is from 1990, and it only has one page, and it just has a link to the manufacturer. I'm like, okay, is this credible? I mean, that's the image. Right.
Well, yeah, and I think this gets back to the persona.
Yeah, the persona. Yeah,
the change, right? Manufacturers reps, I think, are most exposed, right? In terms of how their longevity, their value proposition, and there's a lot of great rep orgs out there.
Yes, there is
companies.
Yes,
the value is there, right? At the end of the day, the value is there, but if they're not bridging properly to what's next within their own organization, it's going to be a hard road ahead. I think for a lot of them. And fortunately, I think there is some awareness. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's some awareness. I think some of the bigger guys, I think there's
no.
some of the bigger guys are there, but it's also the awareness that they think it's a big investment for them to make a change. Well, actually, some of these things are so inexpensive. Everything technology is so cheap. Just building a persona or brand, or if you want to take a video or just build content, you go on to people. Fiverr.com will do anything for you. So you have $30, $50. You don't have to spend all this. 10 people think tens of hundreds of thousands. You can build something that at least shows something, right? That's how I look at it. Or just but anyways, back to my point of getting on my rant that I go off to.
You do rant, but it's good rant. I like it.
Because I get excited because I'm passionate, and at the end of the day, we're all passionate about it.
Right? If you want to be successful in this business, you got to be passionate. That's and that's key. Passion is key. It just is. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, then get the heck out of this thing.
Passionate, and it would show that we care.
Yeah.
So now through this, let's end this phase of this pandemic. Really, what do you see for the future of the industry post-pandemic?
Well, post-pandemic, again, my opinion. So I'm spitballing here, right?
Okay.
So let's take a look. I think there'll be a greater, an exponential, road forward on digital presence and development. That's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I think the ones that successfully do that, I mean, this is not like 10 years ago, folks. I'm talking about it's going to pace up very quickly. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it driven by e-commerce. We haven't touched on, but we can go on for hours on that. But so I think that's going to force competition out of the market. So I think there's going to be digital presence will be a determining factor more in the next 2 years coming out of COVID, whether or not your business model is viable. I believe that. I think more companies will become e-commerce, and have that ability. TI's kind of set the bar, right? But others have, right? It's not just them, it's others. So e-commerce, I think, is there. I think the exposure about FAEs at the distributor level, that's been an age-old conversation. Mm-hmm. The value of FAEs, they're hard to fund. They're expensive. If you're a supplier, it costs you a lot of money. Fully loaded. It could be a couple hundred, $250,000, $270,000 fully loaded, right? I think the digital presence of design assistance on sites, be it design tools, the content structure, the calculators, and all these things, right, will come rapidly to disengage or disenfranchise, that. I see that. I think media companies are going to falter because I don't think many of them, there's a few good ones, and I know I shout out to E-Tech, but they're forward thinking. A couple of others do. What's the next gig? Because as the companies,
what's the next gig? You're 100% correct.
Yeah, you better figure it out. Because you, the customer, will figure it out for you. Like, you don't matter anymore, Mr. Media. Yeah, this is media, so I'm moving on, right? So I think that, and I think media companies that will survive, I think will be able to be accountable, authenticate and verify, how engaged their audiences are, so that you have a better shot of, advertisers have a better shot to find value in that investment. I mean, that's very high level. I look at data intelligence. We spend a lot of time tying, in Big Zeta, for companies' business intelligence, right? To be able to cookie crumb, follow that buyer journey on site, right? That's key. So I think business intelligence through AI and ML, we're working hard at that. Our teams in Portland, is to be able to identify intent. So all that sophistication, coolness on the site, and tracking this and that, distributors and manufacturers can now have that at a much more robust. You don't have to be a $1 billion company by IBM, or Microsoft BI tools, right? You can do it, and we can, we find ways to do that, and that's where the media companies disengage. Yeah. They themselves got to be able to do that, and they don't do it enough. So that's the big difference I see ahead.
I can twist that in the future we'll see companies that will survive and say, let's look our industry, manufacturing, distribution, need to turn into media companies themselves.
They're already media companies.
Yeah, they need to. I mean, they are, but they need to realize what it means and how they do it, and get assistance Yeah, go ahead.
You're right. So maybe I got to qualify that for a second. So you now, and we'll use IBS.
Yeah.
So you now, as you're building out your new environment, right, you're going to have a higher intellectual level of engagement, right, and closer tie. Well, that's what you used to count on, hoping from your media people, right? I'm going to buy this, and I hope I get those leads or whatever. So I hate to say you become a media company, but I think, I said earlier, media companies are forced now to realize that all their advertisers are their competition, right? That's real. That's real. So if that qualifies.
No, I agree. And that's one thing is everybody connects a media company as it's funny as I use the thing that Brian and Nicolette used is everybody has a story, just needs to tell their story. Yeah. And that's really and I love that's how I caught on to them. And I'm like, I'm correct. Everybody has a story. And the thing is, these stories aren't told enough. The wisdom isn't told enough. It isn't brought to the forefront to be able to also educate the current generation, new generation, and show what especially our industry, what it's all about. Because there's fear. It creates fear because then we get back to what a discussion I have is because in my opinion, if I wasn't much more, I think when I was a younger age, I wasn't, but much more forward thinking and having more security of myself, I would feel like a small person going into a conference with all these suits, as you call them, suits around and nobody looking at you. Who is this guy? You feel very intimidated, right? Because there's a demographic of the demographic is there, and it's very male centric demographic at this point, and you feel very insecure. And is this for you? Or you feel welcomed?
You mean if you're potentially a new entry into
a new
this
entry,
business?
You're a 30-year-old, even a 40-year-old, you come in, you don't know, but people just, they're looking around, who are you? And, how I felt that I explained that during a conference, I didn't get that welcoming thing unless I really went and tried to connect with them on a certain level and have that confidence to break that down. And not a lot of people do.
Well, if I qualify that, I think people like yourself, Rob, you're not in your 20s and early 30s.
No, my 40s, yeah.
Right? So you've made that bridge gap, but 40s, the 20 and 40-year gap in there, those people for the most part at these conferences, because you mentioned whether it's ERA or ECIA or EDS, that group, I think, scares a lot of people. Yeah. They don't know how to address you. You're coming into my turf, right? And that's been it's been a godsend for me, right? Working in this young, thoughtful, innovative, freaky, good, technical people that I'm with now, right? But I've always kind of had that bridge, meaning, because I spend all my time outside with customers, right? So I find and gravitate towards that, right? I was lucky. I was just lucky from that standpoint. But I think they don't know how to address you. Or that, not you personally, but that group. I get that.
That group.
I get
how to address it. There's a fear, and that's the fear of the change and what's ahead of us and what we're doing. So, that's really what for me is for me to build the awareness, why I started the Real Talk, why I am doing certain things, which, I'll talk to you right now. I am in the, what will be, everybody can hear what I'm doing. I'm in the process of coming up with Real Talk News.
Oh, you are? Right. Okay.
It's my brainchild that I'm coming up.
Is that industry?
Industry. It'll be both. There'll be mostly industry focus plus some other stuff coming in that affects the industry. Okay. Yeah, and I'm thinking of creating a little thing because there's no other content or media in our industry that has any video behind it. And I've researched it. Some companies tried it 3-4 years ago. You go on YouTube, they try to put someone there and talk about it, and it was not that attractive.
Go back to the old days when EDTN, Electronic Design Technology News, or ENEN, Engineering and Entertainment News.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't know about that.
When the web got launched. I'll say that's both CMP and Rob Roden at Marshall. Actually had a studio.
In
the web, and wow, that is to those forward thinkers like that. And then it died out. Because the media companies didn't know how to manage it.
And I think they weren't ready for it yet. There wasn't time. No. It wasn't time.
There wasn't time. And Avnet did the same thing, right? You had that, but timing's right now.
The timing is right on. And maybe I can have you as a guest co-host one of the episodes of Bringing Real Talk. Because, I love it. I'm not a media. I'm also a persona media personality. But at the end of the day I would love to hear be a platform, maybe 20, 30-minute thing, maybe bi-weekly or monthly, whatever. Do it. aggregate all the news that's coming into the industry with these, and take it and put it on one platform. Say, okay, this is what's happening. There's some interesting things that get released in the marketplace. Oh, this person left this company, went to this company. Yeah. This type of news.
But you got to be able to curate.
You have to curate it properly, right?
Yeah.
For me, that's like, okay, we can start. And that's why I'm thinking, how do I do this at a certain place? First, I want to run a pilot, see how that runs, and basically aggregate all the media from all the sites, and talk about acquisitions, what's going on, products, the industry, where digitalization is going, and have a co-host with me, so we can have a back and forth, talk about stuff and be fun,
I think it's valuable. I think earlier we were talking about, you don't have and let's talk about media. So media doesn't have that iconic publisher. I hate to say publisher because you don't have publishing companies anymore. You have media companies.
Correct.
And we realized that at CNP. We changed our name to CNP Media. When the time was right. But you don't have the publisher or media representative record anymore. You don't have who's the steward of distribution? I don't know. You can name a couple presidents of companies, but you don't have that leadership. And now you have, the Larry Ellisons of the world and others that are taking the forefront. That's where the attention level is, and you match that to persona. Your timing is right on, man. Do that.
Thank you.
I like that idea.
I've got some affirmation, some others I run this by, and you being from the media industry, I think it's just, as I say, curating a platform, doing a couple of pilot runs, and really seeing really how I want to take it. And at the end of the day, is being consistent with it as well, and learning from it, because I think our industry needs it. I think, and what our viewership, our psyches now is much more attracted to video.
Like this. We're doing here, right?
A clip of a video or something. That's what we do, and to get that point across. And it's funny is I never thought I'd be so. I listen to audiobooks. I'm an audiobook guy. I don't read so much. I listen to audiobooks. I listen to podcasts. Most of my information and knowledge in the last 5 years has come from those two things. And I'm a nerd on the internet and read it, but
that's okay. You find your different channels.
I find my different channels. I find my different channels in media. That's really where I take it in, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Just like we talked about reading a book. Sometimes you read a book and like, what the hell? I didn't, because your mind, your ADD, you're like all over the place. You're like, I'm not focused on this. How do we stay focused? And we have to. Some people love just throw books, books back. I can just throw digital books back. That's what I do.
I got to do more of that. I got to start doing that. At least you're not poking fun at my ADD. For those that know me real well, it's really hard for me to read. So, but it was funny because you talked about the internet, or digitizing this industry. That's been really good for me because it made my attention span easier, where I have synopsis of this and that in the small narratives that make sense, rather than pages of things, right? To have to read. So it's great.
So
I look forward
now
to
I know.
I
Actually, it's a great idea. I'm going to throw some ideas to you when I get my little brainstorming plan. I think it'll be
right on.
Say, oh, this makes sense. This works good. But as we close this thing up, what is your vision of future or message to the industry and to the future talent or future generation coming into this?
That's a big one, right? So I think let's quit. This industry has an incestuous way of always trying to complicate this industry, and it's not that complicated. This is the very sexy industry. In the young talent that's needed, that genre of people that has to come in and change the world technology-wise, this is the basis of it. I get software and hardware, and the coolness to work for, for Apple, for Google, for, whatever it may be. I get that. But there's still a lot of sexiness in this business, and this is the beginning of everything. You're at the DNA of all that happens at the end of the day. And where do we misalign that? Why aren't we attracting people? So I think we will come around to that, and I think that'll happen. And I think it can't happen soon enough. It just has to be. So I hope that'll happen, quicker, sooner before I leave this industry. I still got game, by the way. So if anyone wants to challenge me, I got game. I'll play it out. I think the market overall, I'm looking from a technology standpoint. I look at, I'll sum it up at the high level because I think we make things too complicated. So I look at everything has to be powered. Correct. Okay, we all got that. Like I drove my son's car up here today, or last night, and he's got a power pad. It's the
For the charging the phone?
Yeah, for charging the phone. Yeah,
and
you know, why doesn't every car have that, right?
Yeah, just throw your phone in there and it's going to charge wirelessly.
Charge it.
Yeah,
it was like awesome, right? My car doesn't have that, and it's a new car, but it doesn't have that. So I think the awareness publicly in the consumer of power, it's here. It's going to push things, right? I think connectivity, you know, we're over the fact, forget the IoT and IIoT. I'm so tired of hearing all that. Everything gets connected. Get that, right? But I think the key is the data that flows through all that and the access to data. That's the future, is the access to the data. And that's where I'm excited about the technologies that we have to adapt for you and for others that need that. It's access to data and what to do with it. So I got a lot to learn on on AI and ML, but it's here, and that's exciting. Simplify this industry. That's where I think it's at and where it's going, and quit complicating things and sex it up a little bit, because this is a happening industry and a lot of fun to be in.
I could not agree more. And don't be, as I said, for everybody's, don't be afraid of change and fear. Disruption is there.
Possible, yeah.
So thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. Welcome. This has been awesome. You know,
I've enjoyed it.
I think we've gone for about an hour and 40 minutes.
That may be a record for you?
I think 45 was.
45. I could squeeze out another. No, I think we've exhausted that.
We've done it. I appreciate it. Thank you. And for everybody watching, thanks for listening. And I always leave this with: be smart, be thoughtful, be generous. We'll see you on the next Real Talk episode. Thank you, Steve, again.
More than welcome.
All right.
Be happy to come back sometime. Take care.
And we're out.